Welcome to the Republican Professor. I'm your host, Dr. Lucas J. Mather. It's Monday, 19 January, 2026, years after Jesus. It is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, Monday. We're back in Rerum Novarum, written by Pope Leo the 13th. Pope Leo the 13th, scaring the socialist kids. Pope Leo the 13th scaring the hell and the purgatory out of socialist children. We're here in number 32. We got to 31 back in Halloween week 2025 at the Guyvet property. You'll recall that we did a cigar outside, did that. That was wonderful. The edition of Rerum Novarum I'm interacting with is from Catholic Social Thought, the documentary Heritage, edited by Thomas A. Shannon and David J. O'Brien. And I got this at Lighthouse Books in Monterey. The proprietor there is a perpetual heavy metal concert. That's what his face looks like. He never smiles. I don't know how many books I've bought there over the years, and he just looks at me. So anyway, but I thought I'd pick this up. I did study at a Catholic school and did have to read Thomas Shannon's works before when I thought about Catholic social thought, what they call Catholic social thought. We're in number 32. This is 1891, originally written. Rerum Novarum. This is Pope Leo XIII, and he's addressing what was popular at the time, which was socialism. The socialism. Number 32. We're going to do a fair use, make a transformative reading. We'd like to thank Orbis Books for publishing this. Orbis Books, go to their catalog and get a copy yourself or get it used. There's another Orbis Books that I really enjoy by one of my performer mentors named Ralph Koval called Confucius, the Buddha, and Christ. You can pick that one up. Get that one used, or I don't know if they still have it new or not, but try to find a copy of it. I think I'd like to do it on the podcast. I've been saying that for years, but he was a really great man. He was in China when Mao took over. So his Chinese was incredibly good. He sounded like a native speaker to me and made my Chinese look pretty bad by comparison. I mean, to say the least, he was in country, so he had the benefit of years in country that I never had. I only had the academic training, so Chinese, my undergrad. Number 32. But if the owners of property must be made secure, the workman too has property and possessions in which he must be protected. And, first of all, there are his spiritual and mental interests. Life on Earth, as opposed to another planet. Sorry. This is Pope Leo XIII, okay? Life on Earth, however good and desirable in itself, is not the final purpose for which man is created. It is only the way and the means to that attainment of truth and that practice of goodness in which the full life of the soul consists. It is the soul which is made after the image and likeness of God. It is in the soul that sovereignty resides, in virtue of which man is commanded to rule the creatures below him, and to use all the earth and ocean for his profit and advantage. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fishes of the sea and the fowls of the air and all living creatures which move upon the earth. quoting, of course, Genesis. In this respect, all men are equal. There is no difference between rich and poor, master and servant, ruler and ruled, for the same is Lord over all. No man may outrage with impunity that human dignity which God himself treats with reverence, nor stand in the way of that higher life which is the preparation for the eternal life of heaven. Nay, more. Nay, more. Oh, a man has here no power over himself to consent to any treatment which is calculated to defeat the end and purpose of his being is beyond his right. He cannot give up his soul to servitude, for it is not man's own rights which are here in question, but the rights of God, most sacred and inviolable. From this follows the obligation of the cessation of work and labor on Sundays and certain festivals. Today is my Sabbath, so I think he just means the Sabbath. This rest from labor is not to be understood as mere idleness, much less must it be an occasion of spending money and a vicious excess, as many would desire it to be, but it should be rest from labor consecrated by religion. Repose united with religious observance disposes man to forget for a while the business of his daily life, and to turn his thoughts to the heavenly things and to the worship which he so strictly owes to the eternal deity. It is this, above all, which is the reason and motive for the Sunday rest, a rest sanctioned by God's great law of ancient covenant. Remember thou, keep holy the Sabbath day, and taught to the world by his own mysterious rest after the creation of man, he rested on the seventh day from all the work which he had done. That was number 32. Just we're on page 30 of this volume, Catholic Social the Documentary Heritage. We'd like to thank the editors, David O'Brien and Thomas Shannon of Ireland. Stay in Ireland until I die. Far and away, anyone? No? I always say that. Let me tell you about California Rifle and Pistol Association. California Rifle and Pistol Association has been defending the culture of firearm safety and education and conditions for freedom for that in the Golden State for over 140 years. I am wearing a California Rifle and Pistol Association hat. I've had the president of the California Rifle and Pistol Association on the podcast multiple times, and they do exceedingly good work. When you join, I highly recommend that you join. You get sent to you in the mail a physical copy of a magazine, and it's related to shooting sports in California and the legal and cultural issues they're about. It's a wonderful publication. I highly recommend joining California Rifle and Pistol Association. Go to their website, California Rifle and Pistol Association website, and subscribe and join. You can become a life member for a little bit more money, and it's just a wonderful thing to be a part of. Do you have to be a California resident to join? No, you do not. But of course, we want to get as many people who are from California involved as possible. Thanks. Let's turn back to this, the hours of labor, number 33. If we turn now to things exterior and corporal, the first concern of all is to save the poor workers from the cruelty of grasping speculators who use human beings as mere instruments for making money. It is neither justice nor humanity so to grind men down with excessive labor as to stupefy their minds and wear out their bodies. Man's powers, like his general nature, are limited, and beyond these limits he cannot go. His strength is developed and increased by use and exercise, but only on condition of due intermission and proper rest. Rerum Novarum, 1891, Pope Leo XIII. Scaring the socialist kids. Sounds like a slasher film, I know. But okay, it's wonderful, isn't it? He's going after socialism. His strength is developed and increased by use and exercise, but only on condition of due intermission and proper rest. Daily labor, therefore, must be so regulated that it may not be protected during longer hours than strength admits. How many and how long the intervals of rest should be will depend upon the nature of the work, on circumstances of time and place, and on the health and strength of the workman. Those who labor in mines, in quarries, and in work within the bowels of the earth should have shorter hours in proportion as their labor is more severe and more trying to health. Then again, the season of the year must be taken into account, for not infrequently a kind of labor is easy at one time which is at another intolerable or very difficult. Finally, work which is suitable for a strong man cannot reasonably be required from a woman or a child. You mean Pope Leo XIII, you mean there's a difference between a woman and a man? Is that what you're saying? Child labor. It's the next section according to the editors here, okay? We're still in number 33. And in regard to children, great care should be taken not to place them in workshops and factories until their bodies and minds are sufficiently mature. For just as though weather destroys the buds of spring, so too early an experience of life's hard work blights the young promise of a child's powers and makes any real education impossible. Wow. Wow. Women again are not suited to certain trades, for a woman is by nature fitted for homework, and it is that which is best adapted at once to preserve her modesty and to promote the good bringing up of children and the well-being of the family. As a general principle, it may be laid down that a workman ought to have leisure time and rest in proportion to the wear and tear of his strength, for the waste of strength must be repaired by the cessation of work. In all agreements between masters and workpeople, there is always the condition, expressed or understood, that there will be allowed proper rest for soul and body. To agree in any other sense would be against what is right and just, for it can never be right or just to require, on the one side, or to promise on the other, the giving up of those duties which a man owes to his God and to himself, on the top of page 31 of this edition, Orbis Books. Number 34, just wages. We now approach a subject of great importance, and one on which, if extremes are to be avoided, right ideas are absolutely necessary. Wages, we are told, are fixed by free consent, and therefore the employer, when he pays what was agreed upon, has done his part and is not called upon for anything further. The only way, it is said, in which injustice could happen would be if the master refused to pay the whole of the wages, or the workman would not complete the work undertaken, When this happens, the state should intervene to see that each obtains his own, but not under other circumstances. This mode of reasoning is by no means convincing to a fair-minded man, for there are important considerations which it leaves out of view altogether. To labor is to exert oneself for the sake of procuring what is necessary for the purposes of life, and most of all for self-preservation. In the sweat of thy brow thou shalt eat bread. That's quoting something. I forget what passage that is. Hold up. Yeah, hold up. Yeah, hold up. What was that? Number 31. I'm losing my mind here. Genesis 3:1. Oh, yeah, yeah. The curse. Duh. Doi. Therefore, a man's labor has two notes or characters. First of all, it is personal, for the exertion of individual power belongs to the individual who puts it forth, employing this power for that personal profit for which it was given. Second, a man's labor is necessary, for without the results of labor, a man cannot live, and self-consideration, and self-conservation is a law of nature, which it is wrong to disobey. Well, that's interesting. That's a self-defense point he just made. Yo, hold up. Yo, what are you saying about the 2A? What are you saying? Hmm? What are you saying, Pope? Goes along with the California Rifle and Pistol Association commercial I just gave. Yeah, let's listen to that again. Hold up. Yo, hold up. Yeah, a man's labor is necessary, for without the results of labor, a man cannot live. And self-conservation is a law of nature, which it is wrong to disobey. Hmm. Thank you for your commercial for the California Rifle and Pistol Association there, Pope Leo XIII. By the way, California Rifle and Pistol Association was in existence and doing pretty good work back at this time. Pretty cool, huh? Now, if we were to consider labor merely so far as it is personal, doubtless it would be within the workman's rights to accept any rate of wages whatever. For in the same way as he is free to work or not, so is he free to accept a small remuneration, or even none at all. But this is a mere abstract supposition. The labor of the working man is not only his personal attribute, but it is necessary, and this makes all the difference. The preservation of life is the bounden duty of each and all, and to fail therein is a crime. It follows that each one has a right to procure what is required in order to live, and the poor can procure it in no other way than by work and wages. Let it be granted then that, as a rule, workman and employer should make free arrangements, and in particular should freely agree as to wages. Nevertheless, there is a dictate of nature, more imperious and more ancient than any bargain between man and man, that the remuneration must be enough to support the wage earner in reasonable and frugal comfort. If if through necessity or fear of a worse evil, the workman accept harder conditions because an employer or contractor will give him no better, he is the victim of force and injustice. Um, Now, I would add something to this because I don't think it's totally clear and compelling the way he just said it. If through force or fear of a worse evil, the workman accepts harder conditions because an employer or contractor will give him no better, he is a victim of force and injustice. Okay, I would say I would change that to the workman accepts harder conditions because an employer or contractor can give him better and should, but doesn't. Because can, should implies can. If the employer or contractor can't do any better than that, that's a different matter. Now, who determines this can't, and how's that determined? What are the conditions under which an employer or contractor can't offer more? You know, I mean, it makes the impression that um, there are no circumstances under which an employer or contractor is hard up himself, and this is the best he can do, you know, um, under the reasonable person standard, which he seems to be using here. Okay, so talk about that amongst yourselves. Let me know what you think about that. In these and similar questions, however, such as, for example, the hours of labor in different trades, the sanity, the sanitary precautions to be observed in factories and workshops, etc., in order to supersede undue interference on the part of the state, especially as circumstances, times, and localities differ so widely, it is advisable that recourse be had to societies or boards, such as we shall mention presently, or to some other method of safeguarding the interests of wage earners. The state to be asked for approval and protection. I think what he's saying there is in order to supersede undue interference on the part of the state. To me, the way I read this is the state could, with these do-gooders and the so-called progressives, they might use the power of the state to try to fix these problems, which they did. The Democratic Party definitely did, and the Republicans did for a while too. The so-called progressives, okay? But the he notice the language here. He says the undue, right? He says the undue interference on the part of the state. There should be societies and boards, that is, civil society, should come together to try to meet the needs of the community. The state shouldn't be doing it. The state to be asked for approval and protection. I don't know what he meant by that. Number 34, we're on page 32. Benefits of property ownership. Uh-oh. 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 Going after the socialists. If a workman's wages be sufficient to enable him to maintain himself, his wife, his children in reasonable comfort, he will not find it difficult, if he is a sensible man, to study economy. And he will not find it difficult, by cutting down expenses, to put by a little property. Nature and reason would urge him to do this. We have seen that this great labor question cannot be solved except by assuming as a principle that private ownership must be held sacred and inviolable. Hold up. Yo, Leo! Yo, Leo! Leo, Leo, Leo. Going after the socialist children. Leo the 13th. Rawr, rawr. Yeah. Private ownership must be held sacred and inviolable. The law, therefore, should favor ownership, and its policy should be to induce as many people as possible to become owners. I don't know, man. I don't know about that one. I don't know if you'd want to. That seems to be what led to the financial crisis in 2008. See Peter Wallison, hidden in plain sight. If you know, you know. We need to have that on the podcast. We'll have Peter come on. Many excellent results will follow from this. And first of all, property will certainly become more equitably divided. For the effect of civil change and revolution has been to divide society into two widely different castes. On the one side, there is the party which holds the power because it holds the wealth, which has in its grasp all labor and all trade, which manipulates for its own benefit and its own purposes all the sources of supply, and which is powerfully represented in the councils of the state itself. On the other side, there is the needy and powerless multitude, sore and suffering, always ready for disturbance. If working people can be encouraged to look forward to obtaining a share in the land, the result will be that the gulf between vast wealth and deep poverty will be bridged over, and the two orders will be brought nearer together. What he's basically talking about is a middle class, don't you think? I think he's talking about a middle class. Yeah, I think so. Let me know what you think in the comments. Okay, we're doing 32 to 35 and we'll be done. Yeah, this is good stuff. Okay. Another consequence will be the great abundance of the fruits of the earth. Men always work harder and more readily when they work on behalf, when they work on that which is their own. Nay, they learn to love the very soil which yields in response to the labor of their hands, not only food to eat, but an abundance of the good things for themselves and those that are dear to them. It is evident how such a spirit of willing labor would add to the produce of the earth and to the wealth of the community. And a third advantage would rise from this. Men would cling to the country in which they were born, for no one would exchange his country far for far a foreign land. No one would exchange his country far a foreign land. Looks like a typo there. Uh-oh. Shannon, David O'Brien and Thomas Shannon. You missed that, I think. Far a foreign land, if his own afforded him the means of living a tolerable and happy life. These three important benefits, however, can only be expected on the condition that a man's means be not drained and exhausted by excessive taxation. Oh my gosh, did he just say that? Did he just say that? Hold up. Hold up. Got a little Republican over here. A third advantage would arise from this. Men would cling to their community, their country in which they were born, for no one would exchange his country for a foreign land if his own afforded him the means of living a tolerable and happy life. Hmm. These three important benefits, however, can only be expected on the condition that a man's means be not drained and exhausted by excessive taxation. Praise the Lord, man. The right to possess private property is from nature, not from man. Dang, to put that on a coffee mug. And the state has only the right to regulate its use in the interests of the public good, but by no means to abolish it altogether. Yeah, the whole in the interest of the public good thing, you could drive a Mack truck through that, and the Democrats have, and that needs to be tightened up a bit. The state is therefore unjust and cruel if, in the name of taxation, it deprives the private owner of more than is just. Well, that's true. That's definitely true. We got number 36 coming up next time, but we're not going to do that today. Thanks for joining me on the Republican Professor podcast. Remember, the California Rifle and Pistol Association. Join today. You get a wonderful publication in the mail, and they've got merch just like the hat I'm wearing today, and you get to support a wonderful organization that's been going along for over 140 years, fighting the good fight for gun safety, a culture and law that protects freedom in California. We'll take care, and we'll talk to you next time. Happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day, 2026 years after Jesus, 19 January, 2026 years after Jesus. It's a Monday. See you next time.